Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel. Today I want to share with you my December wrap-up. Now, in a previous video I just talked about how I wanted to make my background look a little bit more interesting. You can definitely see that I'm not trying to do that today, but I'm very excited to talk to you about the many books I have read in December. So yeah, here we are. I will start with a couple of monthly stats and then I will go into the individual book reviews. So let's start with the numbers. So these stats are for my goal to reach a 0 TBR, or at least do a very good TBR reduction in 2024. Whether that worked, you will be the judge of that, but however, I started out the year with 47 books on my TBR, and we started out with 34 on the December TBR. So the question is, did we reduce that number? And for that we will need a couple more numbers. The first one is the number of books that I have read. And actually, December was my numbers-wise most successful reading month of the year because I read 13 books, or at least I finished 13 books, which is quite a lot for me personally. So, well done me. However, this is where the numbers get a little bit sad. I also bought or received 11 books. Now, some of those were Christmas books, but actually not that many of those. So I also bought quite a few audiobooks, and then I also borrowed 4 books from the library in December, mainly through Libby to read on my e-reader. So that is already a little bit sad for the TBR reduction, and then I also had 1 reread in the month. And so did I reduce the TBR in December? I did not. Instead, I added 3 books, and those 3 were indeed mostly like my Christmas gifts, basically. So it is fine. I knew that with Christmas I would probably go up a little bit again, but we're leaving December and the year with 37 books on the TBR, which isn't too bad. I think that's actually, you know, still a reduction of like 10 books throughout the year. I had hoped that I would at least get to 12, so I would have reduced my TBR by 1 book each month. We did not quite get there. My average reduction was 0.83, so yeah. Whatever, we will get into more stats in an upcoming video. That's just for this video right here. So now you know how December went with the TBR reduction, or not reduction. Now we're getting into the individual book reviews, and as I have 13 books to talk about, I will try to keep them short. I also have lengthy reading vlogs if you want to hear more thoughts. We're starting out with a book that I finished off in the beginning of December, but I'm actually not quite sure whether I talked about this in my November wrap-up still. I don't know. But I finished my next book for my Discworld journey, and that was Equal Rites by Terry Pratchett. This is book 3 in the publication order and the first book about the witches. In this one we follow a young girl and an older witch, and at the beginning of the story we have a house where the witch is basically helping a mother give birth, and we meet the father who is in his shop when a wizard enters, and he's like, hey, this child that is about to be born will be my heir. I'm gonna give it my staff, and then you know, this is the next wizard. And then the wizard passes away and the staff is supposed to be given to the child. Problem is, the child is not a son, it's a daughter. And so with that we have the first female wizard, which so far in this world didn't exist. And this comes with like very technical issues, especially concerning the kind of school for wizards. This is like very meandering, very chaotic in its storyline. It is fun to read. There's probably a lot of jokes in here that just go over my head, to be honest. I did enjoy this a little bit less than the first 2 books in the Discworld series, just because I love those characters so much more. But I still had a good time with this, and I gave it 3.5 stars. Then the next book I finished was my first Christmassy audiobook, and that was The Merriest Mysteries by Timothy Janovsky. In this one we follow a gay couple. They have been married for a year, but their lives and their marriage aren't going that well. They're both kind of unhappy, and then on Christmas Eve they accidentally attack Santa because they think he's a burglar, and because of that they have to take over as Santa Claus and the Merriest Mister for the next year so that Christmas isn't cancelled. This is also a bit of a chaotic book, but I thought it would be even more chaotic. The beginning of the book takes a lot of time to establish the way that our main characters are not happy with their lives, and I just felt that this part was a little bit too long. I just wanted to get to the silly Christmassiness a little bit faster, and it just dragged me down because I'm not very happy with my current life either, so reading about like other people's unhappiness wasn't really what I wanted to do. So overall this was really fun, really like exciting and silly, but it just had deeper themes as well, but I just wanted it to have a bit more of a balance. This also isn't really a romance because the characters are already together. We do get flashbacks to when they met and kind of see the backstory as well, but it's much more about them finding each other again after their first year of marriage. So it's not like the traditional romance where the characters first meet. However, also with their marriage, I felt like they had a very gendered division of labor in their marriage, and that is kind of part of the issue that is also dealt with, but I still felt like very aggravated by that, and I just didn't really enjoy reading about some of those parts where I felt like things were unfair and stuff like that. So I gave this one 3.5 stars as well. Then I finished an ebook I got from my library, again a Christmassy read, and that was Lovelight Farms by B.K. Borison. And this one we follow a young woman who has a Christmas tree farm, and she is struggling financially. She has two employees, one who is taking care of the grounds and one who's working in the kitchens and doing kind of like catering stuff. And she really wants to like keep these people on. She doesn't want to disappoint them, and so she keeps her financial situation secret, but she also signs up for this competition where in the end she could get a high amount of like prize money, except that she lies on the application and says that she owns the tree farm with her boyfriend. Problem is, she doesn't have a boyfriend, but she does have a best friend, and they have been best friends for like 10 years, and so this is a friends to lovers romance. Now, I do not believe in that. If you have been friends for 10 years, you're not lovers, to me personally. And if you do become lovers, you haven't really been friends. You know what I mean? Like, that's just not how my brain works and how my romantic feelings work. So I just can't really believe in that. So I tried to just like push aside the fact that they had been like very close friends for 10 years. And then I could enjoy it. This is also a little bit steamy. So if you enjoy that, here you go. If you don't, maybe pick another read. But overall, this was enjoyable, even if there were like some very silly and weird bits. And I gave it 3.5 stars as well. Then I finished my next holiday audiobook, and that was Love You, Latke by Elliot. Now this is not a Christmas romance, but a Hanukkah romance, and in this one we follow a young woman who owns a coffee shop. Again, she's struggling financially, and because there is this like weird white lady in a store like next door basically, that decides that the town is going to have a Hanukkah festival instead of a Christmas festival. And because our main character is the only Jewish person in this town who has a shop, she is kind of like told that she's the one to organize the festival. But she's also taking it on because she's like really afraid if the other people do it, that they will just do a Christmas festival and call it a Hanukkah festival. So there's a lot of like talking about you know, how Jewish people are expected to assimilate and still participate in like Christmassy things even though they don't celebrate it and stuff like that, which was a very interesting discussion. And basically our main character is forced to work with someone she finds absolutely annoying to pull the whole festival thing off. Now, this starts in a small town, but most of it is set in New York. So if you're looking for the small town vibes, this might be a little bit disappointing. I was also a little bit sad that we only see the actual festival in the epilogue, because that sounded like such a cool thing, but we don't see like a ton of the planning. We do see some of the planning, but it's more about our like main couple doing Hanukkah festive things in New York with like friends of the love interest, basically. This also heavily deals with themes of family, because our main character has very manipulative parents, and so she has cut her ties from them, but that also meant that she cut ties with like a lot of other people from her Jewish community. And so through this experience with the love interest and his family, she also gets this like community aspect again, which was also very interesting to read about, and I think it dealt with it in a very good way. So in the end, I gave this one 4 stars. After that, I finished another Christmas audiobook, and this one was Christmas at the Gingerbread Inn by Michelle Stimpson. This is one that is free to listen to on Audible, and it has 2 black main characters, which is why I was really interested in it, to, you know, diversify the holiday reading. And in this one, we have a young woman again, and she inherited the Gingerbread Inn from her parents. Basically, she is trying to be a professional musician. I think she plays the cello, if I remember correctly, but she has been down on her luck a little bit, and so her parents gave her the Gingerbread Inn, so she has like a job and a safety net. But she doesn't really have the passion for running the inn, and so she's really scared of like disappointing her parents when all she really wants to do is be a professional musician. And then we have the male main character. This is dual POV, and the male main character has just lost his mother, so he's grieving, and he decides to go back to the Gingerbread Inn because that is where he had like a very, very great memory of Christmas with his family, so he kind of wants to relive that by going there again on his own. And he also had the tiniest little bit of a romantic attraction with the daughter of the people who ran the inn, but this is like 15 years ago. So this one is really sweet. It is kind of a second chance romance, but in a way that I can deal with it, because I really don't like, I don't do friends to lovers and I don't do second chance romance very well. But here they weren't really together. They were just like interested in each other as teenagers. They almost had their like first kiss, but then obviously the holidays ended, the families went their own ways, and they just never saw each other again. So this is kind of like a second chance romance that I can deal with, because there wasn't like any kind of breakup and any kind of like real relationship in the first try bit. So yeah, I really like this. This was really, really cozy. This is set on Martha's Vineyard. Is that how you say it? And it has like this really nice community aspect as well. They have to take in a family from the community. This also deals a little bit with books, because our male main character really loves reading, and he works in a library in Washington, and he's also kind of like a historian. And yeah, these people are just very like passionate and very supportive of each other, and that made the reading experience really, really nice. So I gave it 4 stars as well. Then I finished another Christmassy ebook, and that was The Christmas Cottage by Sarah Morgan. This is also called The Holiday Cottage, I think, in the US. Now, this book was a big disappointment for me, because in this one we have 3 main characters. We do have a young woman who works in kind of like an event management firm, and then we have one of her clients who is an older lady and the client's daughter. Those are the 3 characters, and we do see that there is a little bit of a connection between them, but it's a little bit unclear what this connection is. This one also deals with family in an interesting way, because our like first person who works at this firm, she doesn't really have any family, and she pretends to have a family, so she does fit in with her co-workers. However, she also misses having a family, and she does have a mother, but the mother is very manipulative as well and only calls when she needs money, and probably has some like alcoholism problems or something like that. It isn't really explained like super well, but that's kind of like what is implied. And then the other two characters, they are very family oriented. They have this like vineyard, and it's like super Christmassy there and stuff like that. And so basically the first character ends up spending Christmas in a little cottage on the lands of this family. This was like very dark. And especially like in the beginning of the book, we have a long stretch where it's all about how terrible the first character feels, that she doesn't have a family. We see a horrible scene with the mother. And yeah, this just was a very triggering read for me, and it was very difficult to get through. And this was not like festive, it wasn't escapist, and I feel like all the things I was promised I didn't get. I got like a lot of like trauma in a family, and there is a tiny little bit of romance. I did enjoy that little bit of romance in there, but in the end I have to say that if you can describe this subject matter as escapist and festive, then there's probably like a big cushion of privilege around you. And yeah, I gave this 3 stars. I think the writing was okay, but it's just the marketing was way off for me. Then I finished another Christmas audiobook, but this one was a little bit different because it was Acid Christmas by Charlotte Dune. Now, this book is weird. Very, very weird. And my rating of this book kind of reflects that, but also like, did I even rate this book? Who knows? We are following mainly 2 main characters as they get stranded in the Toronto airport. And the thing is that it's just weird things start to happen. There is a big blizzard, and so they're kind of stuck at the airport. Nobody can leave. It's extremely cold. And we have one character who is a flight attendant who wanted to go home. She has recently lost her husband, so she's also grieving. And then we have another character who is a Black journalist, and she wanted to go to a place where she wanted to do some journalism, but that kind of fell through. And then she gets a call that her brother has a new strain of COVID and that he's in the hospital, and they don't really know whether he will survive. So she really wants to go home to her family to be with her brother, and both of these characters are stuck. Now, our flight attendant character meets 2 men and gets kind of entangled with them. One is an older man who works for a bank, and the other one is a younger man she met on the plane that got them to Toronto. And so yeah, it's like lots of weird. And then the flight attendant books a hotel room, and when she gets there, there is a forgotten jacket in the closet of the room. And because she doesn't have any winter clothes, because she wasn't planning on staying in Toronto at all, she takes this jacket, and then she finds in one of the pockets some LSD. So this is very weird. This is very weird. I thought this would like explore kind of like a social experiment thing, like what happens if a ton of people are stuck in an airport for Christmas. But this was more like what happens when we just have to sit around. And so in that way, it really feels like a COVID book as well. This is also like set slightly past the pandemic times. So they still have COVID, they still have to wear masks at certain points. And there is this new strain of the disease. And yeah, there's some sex, there's some LSD, but like not in the way I thought it would be. So in the end, I gave this book 2.5 stars because I didn't hate it, but I also have no idea what I read. Okay, this next one we can keep super short because I reread a favorite. I reread A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Loved this book. I always give it around 4 stars, but this is just a story that has been ingrained into my soul. So yeah, I love to reread it after Christmas, and that's exactly what I did. If you don't know, this one follows Scrooge, who doesn't believe in Christmas, and then he is visited by 3 ghosts, and they show him what Christmas should be all about. Next up, I finished my last audiobook for the year, and that was Midnight in Everwood by M.A. Kuzniar. This is a Nutcracker retelling. I did listen to one Nutcracker retelling last year. It didn't go super well, so I was a little bit hesitant going into another one. But then I also love the story and I would love a really good retelling of it. Now this book was a little bit strange as well. In the beginning we follow our main character of Marietta, who wants to be a ballet dancer. She's really good at it, but because her parents are quite wealthy and she's from a good family, she can't really do it. This is also set in England, I think. I was like very confused about the setting at the beginning of the book. And this takes up about 30% of the book, like how she's trying to be a ballet dancer but not really allowed to do it, and how that shapes her life and what she's like struggling. And then there's like Drosselmeyer, who is the one who does the like toys and stuff, and in this book she's supposed to marry him. Her parents expect an engagement, so we do have all of that. And then after 30% something happens very dramatic, and she runs into a clock that Drosselmeyer builds, and then she gets to the land of, you know, like the Candyland, whatever it's called. And from that point onwards, it's a completely different book. She's in a very different world with very different people. There's a bit of romance. There is some female friendship in here that I enjoyed reading about. We have this oppressive king that they have to fight against, and it is quite brutal as well. I think this is a YA book, but I wouldn't necessarily say it is. So please, if you want to give this to like teenagers, make sure they're mature enough to read this, because there's torture in here, there's executions, there is also a sex scene at the end that isn't like super explicit, but it's also not like completely fade to black. So yeah, I think you definitely have to reach a certain level of maturity to read this book. And so we have this like whole fantasy thing for the rest of the story, which I really enjoyed and I had a good time with, even though I also had like some problems with it. I liked it. I just felt it was so weird that the first 30% were a different book from the rest, and I think it was just too long of a setup for the story, because it's a retelling. You know where it's going and you're waiting for it. And so in the end, I decided to give it 3.5 stars because I did really enjoy the fantasy aspects, but the beginning just wasn't it. Then we have a book where I did a whole reading vlog for it. So again, trying to keep this one short, and that was my 100th book of the year. We have Tooth and Claw by Walton. This is also a read-along book for the Dragon Read-Along hosted on the channel Bemused Bookworm. And Cleo from the channel Bemused Bookworm was also the person who got me this as a Secret Santa. So I felt like I really needed to read this in December before the year was over. And I'm so glad I did, because this was such a great book. I gave it 4.5 stars. Now, this is not an easy read. People say this is like Pride and Prejudice, but with dragons. Kind of. So I would say you have dragons, that's for sure. And they do live in a world that is very much Regency coded. You have a lot of like social rules you have to follow, and women are very much oppressed. The female dragons, I always say women, it's female dragons. But they're also dragons, so a lot of the like social aspects are kind of like in their nature as well. So for example, the female dragons don't have claws but hands, so they are seen as inferior because they can't defend themselves without weapons. And again, when female dragons are like very close to a male dragon when they're young, they start to turn pink, and that means they're not like virginal anymore. So stuff like that, like stuff that are the kind of like Regency conventions, but they also have like physical manifestations with these dragons. And this is also very much survival of the fittest, which kind of shows you the flaws of a society like that, but also they eat children in this book. Dragon children, but still, it is children. So this has like really dark moments as well. But what I loved about it is just how messy it is. This is just kind of chaos, and I ate it up. And it definitely has tropes of like these like Regency books, you know. It's a very weird experience, and I think it's very unique, and I would say give it a try if you dare. I also just realized I forgot a book in between because I didn't write it down in my smart little notebook. But I also had a book that was an advent calendar. So I read this like every night leading up to Christmas, and I finished it on Christmas Eve. And this was a German book called Vierundzwanzig Türen by Klaus Modick. I gave this one 2 stars. I really loved reading it every night. Like the act of reading a couple of pages every night before going to bed was really nice. The story in itself just didn't do anything for me. And this one we have like a family in the 2000s, because this came out I think in the year 2000, and or like, so the family is probably in the late 90s. And so, yeah, we have the POV of the father. There's 2 teenage daughters, and the wife is American. The father is German. This is set in Germany. It's a German book. And the father is so pretentious. I still don't understand what his job is. I think he is a writer, maybe, or a journalist or something like that. It's like very hard to tell. And it is basically about the mother being gifted an advent calendar from an older man in town. And it's a very strange advent calendar that has little pictures in it that we also get in the book. And with all of these pictures, there is a story behind it. And so we do also get the story behind it told to us. And that story is set right after the Second World War in Germany, and we follow the old man when he was younger and he was trying to survive, and it's basically about that. What was this book about? I don't know. It tried to do kind of like a Jesus thing in the end that I did not get at all. And I cannot recommend this one at all, except for the nice part of reading like every evening. Then for Game Night-a-thon, I also needed to read a short story, so I finally picked up The Angel of Khan El-Khalili by P. Djèlí Clark. This is the second installment in the Dead Djinn universe, and it's just a short story. I will link it down below if you want to read it, and I will also link a audiobook version of it down below because I listened to it while reading along, and it was really, really gorgeous. This is a very short story where we follow a girl who is seeking a miracle from a mechanical angel. And yeah, it's just about like truth and guilt and the things we try to hide from others. And I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. And then on the last day of the year, I managed to finish The Final Empire by Brandon and Sanderson. This is the first Mistborn book, and I had such high expectations for this book. And unfortunately, they were not met. And that's always a little bit sad. But I still gave this book like 3.75 stars. So I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads, gave it 3.5 stars in my spreadsheet. I don't know. I still don't quite know how I feel about it, but there will be a complete reading vlog for the series, so I will put all of my like further thoughts in there. But basically in this first Mistborn book, we do have 2 main characters. We have Kelsier, who is already an like middle-aged man. He is kind of like a master thief, and he also has a certain type of magic that exists in this world. And our second main character is Vin, a teenage girl who discovers through her interactions with Kelsier that she has these magical abilities too. And she is kind of like training under him while they're trying to pull off an impossible kind of heist scenario. But yeah, their heist is kind of like destroying the empire. So it's definitely impossible. But yeah. I struggled with this one a lot. Like, I was intrigued at the beginning. I think Win is definitely an interesting character because she has been treated so poorly for all of her life, and now she meets people who want to pull her in, who she can finally start trusting a little bit, but she's also not so sure about that and stuff. So it's definitely interesting, but then the magic is like very specific. There's very specific rules. It has to do with metals, and people can use those metals to have like different abilities, and we get like descriptions of how these abilities work like in detail very much. And at the first scene when that happened, I was just starting to skim read because I was like, I do not care. And so I had a lot of scenes where there was like fighting, where I was like, oh, just just tell me who wins in the end. I don't care about that. That's just not the kind of fantasy that I really enjoy, because I'm a very character-driven reader, so I need to deeply care about the characters. I need some complex dynamics between the characters, and that's just not what we get here. Kelsier is like very good. He's like a good man, and even though he's a thief, but he's still a good thief. And stuff like that. So it's like very flat to me, even though he does get kind of like a tragic backstory. I never really felt like he was a real person because he's just so good. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like this is a Brandon Sanderson thing. I didn't really mind it so much in Elantris, even though there we have that like good man as well. We'll see. I will definitely continue on reading this series, but the first installment didn't blow me away. Even though the ending was quite exciting, I also had guessed the kind of twist that was happening. And there was something that Brandon Sanderson does that I think when the book came out in 2006 was quite disturbing and like new and, you know, but it's not now. I'm just reading these books too late for them to have the same effect on me, I guess. So that's it. That was my reading in December. I would love to hear what was your favorite book of December and what was your favorite book of the year, if you want to tell me that as well. And I will talk to you very soon. I will have lots of end of the year content coming up in the next couple of days, so definitely subscribe if you haven't yet and leave a like or a nice comment. I always appreciate those. Bye!